Hello everyone, welcome in the first part of RxJava free tutorial for beginners. Today we're going to discuss base concepts of RxJava, which are observable and observer. Don't worry if you don't understand something. I know that RxJava is generally hard topic and it has steep learning curve. We'll be covering topics described today in more details in the next videos. Alright, so let's start with the question what RxJava is. It's a library that makes developer lives easier when it comes to asynchronous programming, and it is especially useful when you need to deal with processing a lot of data in the same time. The core concepts are observable and observers. Observable is something that produces and emits the data, and it can be, for example, as I just mentioned, some data which comes from requests, or for example, it can be data which comes from your SQL query. And the observers are simply objects which are listening for that data. RxJava comes with a ton of useful operators, and these operators are simply the backbone of RxJava, and they are, let's say, the base thing which make RxJava so powerful. We have, for example, operators for creating observables, transforming them, filtering, combining, and much more. And of course, we have a ton of operators which allow us to manipulate the data so we can achieve, let's say, almost everything we want with our data. RxJava is about what, not how. So imagine you need to implement by yourself, for example, functionality of mouse double click. You probably end up with some variable for storing max time between 2 clicks and some conditions. With RxJava, it's simply few lines of code. So you don't, let's say, implement things, you just simply declare what you are going to do. Okay, so let's start describe briefly observable and observer and correlation between them. As I already said, observable is something that emits the data and pushes it down the stream. If you want to create observable, you need to utilize some of the functions provided by RxJava, and you can, for example, create observables from arrays, from lists, from, for example, callable action, and of course everything depends on your use case. We have different types of observables, and each of them has its own specific purpose, and we'll be describing them in the more details in following videos. And as I already stated, our data source for observable can be literally everything. It can be mouse click, API request, DB query, and much more. On the other hand, we have our observer. So as I already mentioned, it listens by subscriptions for items emitted by observable, and of course it consumes these items. It usually implements 3 callbacks, so we are listening for the next item in the pipeline, for some error, because of course it can occur, and of course for completion of the emission of items from observable. Okay, let's have a look at this fancy drawing which I prepared for you. In this drawing represents the relation between the observable and the observer. So our observable emits mouse click count with each click, and here we have our operators. In this example, the operators are delay, filter, and map. When the observable emits item, let's say number 1 in our example, it goes here and encounters delay operator. This delay operator can, for example, delay emission of the item by 5 seconds. When this 5 seconds passes, our item goes here to the filter operator, and filter operator basically can, for example, check if the number is even or not, and when it's even, it goes here, so we encounter map operator. And what map basically does is transforming one type to another. So let's say that we have a click count 1 and this is, let's say, mapped to the string, right? And then our item goes here. So on next callback is called. When the emission is complete, on complete callback can be invoked eventually. I mean, I say eventually because, well, observable may or may not signal that. It really depends on the use case. And also we can have on error callback, which basically is invoked when somewhere in the pipeline exception is thrown. So as you can see, the core concept is not so complicated. Okay, before doing some coding, let's jump to the RxJava GitHub page and grab RxJava library. So I'm moving down to the getting started section, and generally I recommend you creating simple Java project based on the Gradle build system in your favorite IDE, because it is the fastest way when you want to test something, right? All we need to do is grab that piece of code and paste it to our Gradle file. So as you can see, it cannot be in that form because actually we need to replace the X and Y with the proper number version. So the newest version is 3.0.12. Okay, so let's build our project. Okay, I will show you how to create observable which will simulate mouse click events. So we will be emitting strings like click number 1, click number 2, etc. So we are writing observable of type string. Let's call it observable, and we do something like this. We call create method of observable, and as you can see, this create method takes as a parameter observable on subscribe of type string. Let's have a look on this. So you can see that observable on subscribe is just functional interface, which means that it has only one method, and we need to create implementation of that method. And we need to create implementation of this subscribe method, which takes this emitter, observable emitter, as a parameter. So let's back to our main method and just implement that object. So we can use this lambda function, as I already told you, because this is the functional interface. And actually with this emitter we are now able to simulate emits mouse click events, and this is how we do it. So we call the onNext method, and this onNext method takes string as a parameter, and this is because we declared it here, right? If we, let's say, put integer here, our onNext method takes, let's do it again, takes integer as a parameter, right? So we don't want that. We back to the string and we call the onNext. Let's say this click number 1, copied it 2 times, click number 2 and click number 3. Yeah, so this is basically how we emit items, utilizing this emitter and calling onNext function on it. By default, our observable does nothing because we need to start subscribing, listening for emissions of items of observable. So we are doing it like this. We call the subscribe method on observable, and thanks to that we'll be able to listening for items which are emitted here. And we are looking for this overload. So as you can see, I want to listen for next items for error if this error occurs in the pipeline, and I also want to listen for completion of emission. And as you can see, on next and on error basically is of consumer type, so we need to pass implementation of that type, which is interface. And let's have a look on this right now, so you will have a better understanding what I'm talking about. Let's find our consumer. I already have that. Let's open that class. And yeah, this is the functional interface, which has one method called accept. And in our example, we'll create implementation of that method and we'll pass string as a parameter. This is because our observable emits string, and in that case, our consumer simply takes string as a parameter. Okay, let's go back to the example and implement our onNext object. Let's rename that name because I don't like it. We are emitting some items, and let's print it out the console. Okay, so we have currently implemented onNext parameter. Let's go to the onError parameter, and as you can see, the prompt already shows me that I can create implementation of consumer of type throwable. So we'll be able to utilize the throwable object and get some information in case some error occurs during our emission of items. So let's implement this also. And we type throwable get message. Okay, and in the end, as you remember, we'll be implementing onComplete, which is of action type. And actually, let's go back to our subscribe method declaration. Let's go here. Where it is. Okay, so we have it here. So as you can see, it's again functional interface, but it has method which doesn't take any parameter here. This is why we declared this implementation like this. If our method doesn't take any parameter, we simply create these two braces. And similarly, we'll print our onComplete action. Theoretically, we have all in place, so let's just run our example. So as you can see, the items click number 1, number 2, and number 3 are emitted, and this is because we have implementation of the onNext here in place. So we are listening to that, and basically we are able to get the items through this argument, right? So let's have a look how it will behave in case we have some errors in our pipeline, in the stream. So let's throw some exception. Something bad happened. I don't know it's pronounced correctly, but let's assume it is. Let's run our example again. And as you can see, we have something bad happened message here in the console, and this is because we have our throwable implementation in place. So we are listening to that type, let's say, of events, right? In that case, error events. Okay, let's delete that. And let's say that our emitter notifies us about completion of emission. So we simply call onComplete method on our emitter, and this is how we notify our observers that we already finished emissions. And let's run our example again. All right, so you can see we have our onComplete printed, and once again, this is because our implementation on the onComplete action here. So we know basically that our emission or emission of the observable is complete. Okay, that's it for now for this video. In the future videos we'll cover much more about RxJava, because in this video we just scratch the surface. And thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.